Make yourself comfortable and settle in. Today, we are deep diving into the scrolls of a vanished kingdom, Eldric. We're going to peel back the layers of dust and shadow to reveal the secrets of its forgotten citadel. We'll explore why a kingdom so strong fell so silently, and follow a young knight as he discovers that some truths are heavier than gold. It's a story of loyalty, betrayal, and the magic that lingers in the ruins. You won't want to miss a single chapter of this one.
Introduces a once glorious kingdom now shrouded in mystery, with deserted streets and ancient fortifications.
The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Elias, the young historian, stepped through the mist-laden fields that stretched toward Eldric. For centuries, the kingdom had been spoken of in hushed tones. A realm once renowned for its towering fortifications and bustling streets, now reduced to whispers of memory. Legends told of Eldric's glory, of kings and scholars, of knights who defended the walls with unwavering courage, and of markets alive with music and laughter. Yet, as Elias approached, all that grandeur seemed swallowed by time. The gates of Eldric loomed ahead, colossal and imposing, even in ruin. Moss crept along the edges of the stone, and vines wound their way through cracks, slowly claiming the structure as nature's own. The iron portcullis, rusted and warped, still held the faint echo of past might. Elias ran his hand along the cold, rough surface of the stone, imagining the countless soldiers and townspeople who had once passed beneath this arch, unaware that one day their world would be forgotten. He pushed forward, careful of the loose stones underfoot, and stepped onto the empty streets. The silence was almost oppressive. No laughter, no clatter of hooves, no voices of merchants calling out their wares, only the whisper of wind weaving through the deserted alleyways. Wooden shutters hung askew on buildings that had long since lost their roofs, and the cobblestone streets bore cracks through which weeds boldly sprouted. The city was frozen in time, a ghostly echo of life that once thrived here. Elias paused before a grand fountain in the center of the square. Its carvings, though weathered, still told tales of Eldric's past. A king standing atop a hill, sword in hand, and a scholar bending over scrolls in a great hall of learning. Water no longer flowed from the fountain. The basin was dry, cracked, and covered in moss. Yet he could almost hear the laughter of children chasing one another through the plaza, feel the energy of a city alive with trade and knowledge. It was a city trapped between memory and reality, its soul suspended in the shadow of what once was. Curiosity led Elias to the ancient library at the edge of the square. Though the doors had long since fallen off their hinges, the stone walls remained, remarkably intact. He stepped inside, brushing aside fallen debris, and found rows upon rows of empty shelves. Dust hung thick in the air, illuminated by shafts of sunlight piercing through the broken windows. Despite the desolation, Elias felt a strange reverence. This was the heart of Eldric, the place where knowledge had once flourished. He imagined scholars hunched over parchment, debating philosophy, history, and science, unaware that centuries later, a lone historian would wander these ruins in search of the kingdom's story. As he wandered deeper into the library, Elias discovered a hidden alcove behind a crumbled wall. Within it lay remnants of scrolls, brittle and yellowed with age, their ink faded but still legible. One, in particular, caught his eye. It was a map of Eldric, detailing its streets, gates, and the surrounding lands. Even in its deteriorated state, the meticulous care of the cartographer was evident. Elias traced the lines with his finger, feeling a connection to the person who had once poured their heart into this work. Here, in these remnants, the memory of Eldric endured. The historian left the library and wandered toward the city's walls, their heights still formidable, despite centuries of neglect. Watchtowers punctuated the ramparts, their silhouettes standing like silent sentinels against the morning sky. He climbed one of the towers, each step creaking under his weight, and when he reached the top, he gazed out over the surrounding lands. Fields stretched endlessly, dotted with the remains of farms and villages long abandoned. Rivers wound through the valley below, reflecting the early light in shimmering ribbons. For a moment, he imagined the city in its prime, bustling with life, its people tending to their trades and responsibilities under the watchful eye of their rulers. Elias descended and explored further, discovering a small chapel near the eastern gate. The stained glass windows had shattered long ago, leaving jagged fragments clinging stubbornly to their frames. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of damp stone. The altar stood untouched, a testament to devotion that had outlasted the people themselves. Elias felt a profound sadness, but also a sense of awe. The chapel was a place where faith had endured, even as the city fell silent. It reminded him that Eldric was more than its streets and walls. It was the sum of its people, their hopes, and their stories. As the day wore on, Elias reached the outskirts of the city and paused by the hidden gates, the entryway through which he had first arrived. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the courtyard. He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs, and reflected on what he had witnessed. Eldric was a city of ghosts, yes, but it was also a city alive in memory, preserved in every stone, scroll, and shadow. Every corner told a story, and every story whispered the same lesson, that even when civilizations fade, their essence endures through those who remember. Elias turned back for one last look. The gates, now bathed in the golden light of the afternoon, seemed to welcome him, not as an intruder, but as a witness to their history. He knew his journey had only just begun. The hidden gates of Eldric had opened not merely to a city lost in time, but to the endless pursuit of understanding, to the uncovering of secrets, waiting patiently for someone willing to listen. With a final glance at the towering stone arch, Elias stepped forward, determined to uncover more, to listen to the echoes of a kingdom that, though vanished, had left behind whispers for those patient enough to hear them. Eldric's story was far from over. It lived in him now, in the slow, deliberate steps he took along the cobblestones, in the quiet reverence with which he treated the past, and in the certainty that the forgotten kingdom would never truly be forgotten again. A historian uncovers old scrolls and maps, hinting at a lost treasure and forgotten secrets. The sun had dipped low behind the jagged peaks surrounding Eldric, casting long shadows over the ruined city. Elias, the young historian, had spent hours wandering through the deserted streets, tracing the remnants of a kingdom lost to time. Every stone and shutter whispered secrets of the past, but he felt there was more, something hidden, something waiting to be uncovered. It was this thought that led him to the library, a crumbling structure that had somehow resisted the decay of centuries. The entrance was narrow, partially blocked by fallen timber and moss-covered stones, yet Elias squeezed through, feeling a thrill of anticipation. Inside, the air was heavy with dust, and the scent of old parchment hung like a ghost over the empty shelves. Sunlight streamed in through broken windows, catching the motes of dust and turning them into tiny dancing specters. The silence was profound, broken only by the creak of Elias's boots on the wooden floor and the occasional rustle of a disturbed bird nesting in the rafters. He approached a section of the library that seemed untouched by looters or time. Here, the shelves were lined with scrolls, though many had fallen, their edges curled and brittle. He carefully picked one up, marveling at the faded ink and delicate illustrations. The writing was in a language he recognized, ancient Eldrician, but the symbols were adorned with strange embellishments, seals that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. As he unrolled the scroll, he discovered maps, charts, and notes penned by a scholar who had lived centuries ago, documenting the secrets of Eldric and its treasures. Elias's heart quickened as he spread the maps across a broken table. One map, in particular, stood out. It depicted the citadel and surrounding lands, marking hidden tunnels, forgotten pathways, and secret chambers. The annotations suggested the presence of a treasure buried long before the kingdom fell, as well as texts that contained knowledge thought lost forever. The scholar's handwriting was meticulous, and the notes hinted at mysteries of governance, lost rituals, and powerful artifacts once safeguarded by the royal family. As he examined the scrolls, Elias noticed a peculiar mark, a small symbol repeated on several maps. It resembled a crescent intertwined with a star, and next to it was written in a tiny, elegant script, "Here lies the truth that none may see." His curiosity was piqued. What truth had been hidden here? And why had the kingdom been abandoned so completely? He felt as if the scholar himself were whispering through time, urging him to continue the search. Elias spent hours sifting through the scrolls, uncovering fragments of a story that spanned generations. He read about the last king of Eldric, a ruler who had been both revered and feared, whose obsession with protecting a sacred relic had led to the kingdom's ultimate decline. The relic, according to the scholar, possessed knowledge and power beyond imagination, and it had been hidden within the citadel itself. Guards, scholars, and priests had sworn oaths to protect it, yet time had eroded both their vigilance and their memory. As the historian pieced together these fragments, he realized that the citadel's labyrinthine halls were more than simple stonework. They were designed to conceal, to protect, and to test those who sought its secrets. Passageways twisted in ways that defied ordinary maps. Doors opened only under specific conditions, and rooms were hidden behind false walls. The scholar's notes described clever mechanisms, intricate locks, and riddles that guarded the most precious treasures. Elias felt a shiver of excitement. This was not merely a ruined city. It was a puzzle, a challenge set for anyone daring enough to uncover its mysteries. Night fell, and the library grew colder, yet Elias could not tear himself away. He lit a small lantern, its warm glow illuminating the delicate lines of the scrolls, and continued decoding the scholar's writings. One passage described a hidden chamber beneath the central tower of the citadel, accessible only through a narrow tunnel concealed beneath the garden courtyard. The scholar had included a sketch of the tunnel's entrance, nearly invisible to anyone untrained, marked only by a stone bearing the same crescent and star symbol. Elias traced the lines with his finger, imagining himself crawling through the damp, dark tunnel, discovering the secrets that had been buried for centuries. Hours passed like minutes as he read. The scrolls told stories of betrayal, secret alliances, and hidden passages that had allowed certain individuals to escape the fall of Eldric. They spoke of a scholar who had attempted to safeguard the kingdom's knowledge by encoding it in maps and scrolls, ensuring that only those who were patient, clever, and perceptive would ever find it. Elias realized that this discovery was more than treasure. It was a legacy, a message across time from those who had lived and died in the citadel. By midnight, Elias had catalogued the scrolls and sketches, feeling a deep connection to the scholar who had documented these secrets centuries ago. The weight of history pressed upon him, and he understood that his journey had only just begun. The citadel's mysteries awaited, and with the scholar's guidance etched onto the delicate scrolls, he now held the keys to unlocking them. As he rolled the maps carefully and placed them into his satchel, Elias looked out through the broken windows at the moonlit ruins of Eldric. The empty streets seemed less desolate now, alive with the echoes of those who had come before. He felt a strange mix of awe and responsibility. He was no longer merely a visitor in a forgotten kingdom. He was its witness, its recorder, and perhaps its solver. With the scrolls safely in his possession, Elias left the library, his footsteps echoing along the cobblestones. Each corner of Eldric seemed to whisper encouragement, urging him onward. The hidden treasures, the forgotten secrets, and the legacy of the scholar were now within reach, awaiting the determination and intellect of a modern seeker. And so, beneath the pale glow of the moon, Elias began his journey into the heart of the Forgotten Citadel, carrying with him the knowledge of the past and the promise of discovery. The city, though silent, had found its historian, and the scholar's secrets would finally see the light of day. Legends and whispers from villagers and travelers recount the rise and fall of the kingdom. As dawn broke over the ruins of Eldric, a cool mist clung to the streets, curling around broken arches and moss-covered stones. Elias, the young historian, moved carefully through the remnants of the once great kingdom, his footsteps echoing softly in the deserted alleys. Though the city lay silent, he could sense the presence of the past, a chorus of memories lingering in the wind, whispering tales of a kingdom that had risen and fallen centuries ago. He paused near a crumbling fountain in the town square, its basin dry but etched with carvings of knights, scholars, and villagers. There, among the stones, Elias noticed faint markings, scratches, symbols, and tiny inscriptions that suggested the hand of someone who had lived through Eldric's final days. Each mark seemed deliberate, as if meant to survive time itself. He crouched to examine them more closely and imagined the villagers who had once scrawled messages here, desperate to leave their voices behind. Elias's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, almost imperceptible murmur. The wind shifted, carrying with it the echo of distant voices. He froze, straining to hear. At first, it seemed like mere imagination, but gradually the whispers grew more coherent, forming fragments of conversation that felt as though they had been suspended in the very stones. He could hear a mother soothing her child, a blacksmith haggling with a merchant, travelers sharing tales of distant lands. Though the words were faint and fractured, they carried a haunting familiarity, the rhythm of a life once lived. Moving deeper into the city, Elias followed the whispers to the edge of the old marketplace. Here, the skeletal remains of wooden stalls still stood, leaning at odd angles, and the cobblestones bore the grooves of countless cartwheels. As he walked, the voices became clearer. He could almost see the villagers bustling through the square, a baker rolling dough, a pair of children chasing one another through the alleys, a musician playing a lute that no longer existed. Each voice told its own story. Yet together, they painted a vivid picture of a community that had thrived centuries ago. Elias stopped near a toppled statue of a former king. Though the marble was chipped and weathered, the expression on the king's face seemed almost alive, a reminder of the authority and ambition that had once guided the kingdom. The historian traced his fingers over the cold stone, imagining the court advisors who had whispered strategies, the knights who had pledged loyalty, and the citizens who had celebrated festivals beneath this very figure. He could almost hear the clatter of hooves in the courtyard, the rustle of banners, and the laughter of courtiers enjoying a summer's feast. By midday, Elias reached the outskirts of Eldric, where the walls opened to the rolling countryside. Here, the voices of the past shifted, becoming the tales of travelers and wanderers. Merchants had arrived from distant lands, sharing news of trade and politics. Wanderers spoke of legends, myths, and hidden treasures. One tale recounted a forgotten alliance with a neighboring kingdom, sealed by marriage and oath, that had ensured decades of peace. Another spoke of a great betrayal, a plot so cunning that it had tipped the balance of power and set in motion the decline of Eldric itself. Elias listened carefully, committing each story to memory, knowing that these fragments of oral history were as valuable as the crumbling scrolls he had found in the library. In the shadow of a ruined watchtower, Elias discovered a small cluster of cottages, their timbers blackened and walls crumbling, yet still bearing the marks of the people who had lived there. On the walls of one cottage, he noticed faint drawings etched into the plaster. Animals, constellations, and faces. He realized these were the imprints of everyday life, art left behind by villagers hoping to be remembered. As he studied them, he imagined the laughter of children echoing through these rooms, the smell of freshly baked bread, the quiet conversations at night. Each mark was a voice, a memory captured in stone and plaster, waiting to be heard again. Elias followed a narrow path leading to a small chapel at the edge of the town. Its roof had partially collapsed, and the stained glass windows were shattered, but the altar remained, carved from stone and adorned with faint traces of paint. Here, the voices of Eldric were quieter but deeper, tinged with devotion, hope, and sorrow. He could imagine villagers kneeling in prayer, priests murmuring blessings, and choirs singing hymns that had long since vanished from the world. The chapel seemed to hold the spirit of the kingdom, preserving its faith and resilience even as its walls crumbled. As the afternoon light filtered through the broken windows, Elias noticed a faded mural along the far wall of the chapel. It depicted a scene of Eldric in its glory. Markets filled with activity, knights patrolling the streets, scholars debating in grand halls. Even though the colors had faded, the essence of the kingdom remained. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine, realizing that these whispers from the past were more than just sounds. They were the heartbeat of Eldric, the living memory of a civilization long gone. Continuing his exploration, Elias arrived at a small bridge spanning a dried-up canal. Beneath it, he found carvings that told stories of love, loss, and heroism, messages left by those who had crossed the bridge over centuries. One inscription read, "Remember us, for we were here." Another depicted a knight kneeling before a scholar, a gesture of respect for knowledge over might. Elias ran his fingers along the carvings, feeling a connection to the people who had etched their lives into the very stones of the city. These voices, though faint, spoke louder than any written record. They conveyed emotion, humanity, and the enduring spirit of Eldric. As evening approached, Elias climbed a hill overlooking the entire city. From this vantage, he could see the sprawling streets, the ruined marketplace, the chapel, and the remaining towers. The whispers of the past blended with the rustling leaves and distant calls of wildlife, creating a symphony of memory. He realized that Eldric was not truly silent. It had always spoken, through stone, through inscriptions, through the air itself. The voices of its people had been waiting for someone willing to listen, and now Elias had heard them. He sat on the hilltop as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the ruins in a warm, golden glow. He reflected on the lives, joys, struggles, and wisdom of those who had walked these streets long before him. Every voice he had heard, every story he had pieced together, was a reminder that history was not merely dates and events. It was people, their choices, their dreams, and their legacies. Eldric, though vanished, still lived in its voices, waiting to share its story with anyone patient enough to listen. With a deep breath, Elias rose and prepared to descend. The city's whispers had guided him, and now he carried them forward. He understood that the past was not only a place to study, but a living presence that shaped understanding, inspired curiosity, and demanded respect. The voices of Eldric had spoken, and their echoes would remain with him forever, guiding him through the next chapter of his journey into the secrets of the Forgotten Citadel. A young knight ventures into perilous forests and mountains, seeking answers about the vanished citadel. The morning fog clung to the edge of the Eldric ruins as Sir Alaric, a young knight with a mind sharpened by curiosity and courage, prepared for his journey. Unlike the others who had only lingered among the crumbling walls and deserted streets, Alaric sought answers. He had grown up on tales of the Forgotten Citadel, of its towering spires and hidden chambers, and though the city now lay in ruins, he believed its secrets were still waiting, buried beneath moss and stone. With sword at his side and a satchel of provisions, he set out toward the dense forests that bordered the kingdom, determined to follow the paths whispered about in the surviving scrolls. The forest rose like a living wall ahead of him. Trees, gnarled and ancient, stretched skyward, their twisted branches forming a canopy that barely let sunlight through. Birds flitted through the leaves, their calls eerie and melodic, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. Each step Alaric took pressed him deeper into the unknown, and he could feel the weight of history around him. Here, he was not merely a knight, but an explorer of memory, venturing into a place where time had both preserved and concealed the truths of Eldric. He followed a narrow trail marked faintly on the map he had found among the historian's scrolls. Moss-covered stones lined the path, and roots threatened to trip him at every turn. Despite the obstacles, Alaric moved with determination, scanning the undergrowth for any signs of movement or hidden passage. The forest was alive, yet quiet in a way that suggested watchfulness, as if it too remembered the kingdom that had once thrived here. Occasionally he glimpsed broken statues or scattered remnants of what might have been way stations, each one whispering a story of travelers long gone. Hours passed as Alaric navigated the dense woods, and the terrain grew more treacherous. Hills rose steeply, and jagged rocks jutted from the earth like the spines of slumbering giants. The young knight paused to catch his breath on a ridge overlooking a misty valley below. There he glimpsed the remnants of Eldric's outlying villages, tiny clusters of rooftops peeking through the fog. His heart swelled with awe. Though the kingdom had vanished, its echoes persisted, scattered across the land like breadcrumbs leading him deeper into the past. The trail eventually led him to an abandoned watchtower, half collapsed, but still standing with silent dignity among the trees. Alaric approached cautiously, sword drawn, noting the signs of decay and the clever mechanisms once designed to defend the citadel from intruders. The tower's interior was dark, but moonlight filtering through the cracks illuminated a spiral staircase leading upward. As he climbed, the air grew cooler, and he could hear the faint creak of the ancient wood beneath his boots. At the top, he looked out across the forest canopy, spotting a series of small clearings that seemed arranged unnaturally, like a hidden pathway awaiting discovery. Alaric descended and followed the path, which wound through twisted roots and mossy rocks. Suddenly, he heard the rustle of leaves behind him and spun around, sword raised. A lone deer emerged from the shadows, its eyes wide and cautious. Alaric lowered his weapon and exhaled. The encounter reminded him that this forest, though quiet, was full of life and mysteries beyond human understanding. He pressed on, deeper into the woods, guided by intuition, memory, and the fragments of maps and scrolls he carried. As night fell, the forest transformed. Shadows lengthened, and the sounds of nocturnal creatures filled the air. Alaric built a small fire, its flickering light casting dancing shapes across the trees. He reflected on the journey so far, thinking of the knightly orders that had once protected Eldric, the scholars who had chronicled its secrets, and the citizens who had lived and loved within its walls. He realized that his quest was not only about uncovering physical treasures, but also understanding the spirit of a kingdom long forgotten. The next morning, Alaric continued his ascent toward the mountains that bordered the forest. The terrain became more unforgiving, with steep cliffs and loose gravel threatening to throw him off balance. At one point, he paused on a narrow ledge overlooking a roaring river far below. The water, glinting in the morning sun, seemed to echo the tumult of history itself, relentless, unstoppable, and filled with hidden currents. He traced the river's path with his gaze, noting the points where bridges and fords once existed, connecting the outlying villages to the heart of the citadel. Each landmark was a clue, a fragment of a puzzle that had been scattered across time. Hours turned into days as Alaric pressed further into the mountains. He encountered treacherous passes, sudden storms, and wildlife that both threatened and fascinated him. In one clearing, he discovered an ancient stone marker etched with the same crescent and star symbol that had appeared on the scholar's maps. It was weathered almost beyond recognition, yet its presence confirmed that he was on the right path. He traced the symbol with his fingers, feeling the energy of those who had carved it centuries before. It was a silent message across time, urging him forward. Finally, after a long and grueling climb, Alaric reached a plateau that overlooked the citadel from a distance. Though partially shrouded in mist, he could make out the towers, walls, and gates rising from the forest below. It was both breathtaking and humbling. The citadel seemed alive in its silence, a sentinel of history holding its secrets tightly. Alaric felt a surge of determination. The journey had been perilous, but the answers, the truths, and perhaps even the treasures, lay ahead within those ancient walls. As he descended toward the citadel, he noticed that the forest seemed to part for him, guiding him toward hidden paths and concealed entrances. The knowledge he had gained from maps, scrolls, and whispers of the past allowed him to navigate obstacles that might have deterred another. Each step brought him closer, not only to the citadel, but also to understanding the life, the struggles, and the triumphs of a kingdom that had once flourished and fallen. By evening, Alaric stood at the edge of the citadel's outer wall. The gates loomed high above him, cracked and weathered, but still formidable. He traced the lines of the stone with his hand, imagining the knights who had once stood guard here, the scholars who had recorded the kingdom's history, and the citizens who had walked these streets with pride and hope. The journey had tested his courage, his resolve, and his mind. But the young knight knew that this was only the beginning. With a deep breath, Alaric drew his sword and stepped forward, ready to uncover the secrets hidden within the Forgotten Citadel. Every shadow, every crumbling wall, every silent corridor was a story waiting to be told, and he was determined to bring it to light. The journey through forests and mountains had prepared him, But the citadel itself would demand all of his skill, wisdom, and bravery. And so, beneath the pale glow of the evening sky, the young knight began the next chapter of his quest, ready to face the challenges of history, mystery, and legend.
Magical creatures, strange phenomena, and mysterious ruins challenged the knight and his companions. Sir Alaric paused at the edge of the forest, where the dense canopy of Eldric's northern woods rose like a dark sea of green. Legend spoke of these woods as enchanted, a place where reality shifted and time seemed to fold in on itself. Travelers warned that those who entered unprepared often became lost, wandering in endless circles or succumbing to illusions that preyed on the mind. Yet Alaric, guided by the scholar's maps and his own unwavering determination, stepped forward, eager to uncover the secrets the forest concealed. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers, mingling with the faint, sweet aroma of unknown herbs. Sunlight filtered through the towering trees in scattered beams, illuminating patches of moss-covered ground like islands of gold. At first, the forest seemed calm, almost welcoming, yet there was a subtle hum in the air, as if the woods themselves were alive, observing his every move. Each rustle of leaves, each distant bird call seemed laden with meaning, warning, or perhaps guidance. Alaric moved cautiously, scanning for hidden paths or strange markings that might indicate a trail. He soon noticed peculiar shapes among the undergrowth, mushrooms that glowed faintly in the twilight, twisting vines that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them, and trees whose bark bore strange, almost human-like patterns. At one point, he came upon a small pool of water, so still it reflected the canopy perfectly, yet the reflection did not match reality. Alaric leaned closer and saw not the forest above, but fleeting images of Eldric as it had been centuries ago. Knights patrolling streets, children running through the marketplace, scholars poring over scrolls. The vision vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving him both awed and unsettled. The path led him deeper, where the trees grew thicker and the shadows longer. Strange sounds echoed around him, whispers in languages long forgotten, the soft laughter of unseen voices, and the faint clang of armor that seemed to come from nowhere. Alaric's instincts sharpened. He gripped his sword tightly, ready for any threat, whether human or supernatural. Yet as he pressed forward, he realized that the forest was testing him, not merely with danger, but with illusion. Shapes and forms appeared at the edges of his vision, vanishing whenever he turned to confront them. Every step required focus, courage, and a steady mind. Hours passed, and the terrain became more treacherous. Roots twisted across the forest floor, forming natural obstacles, while gnarled branches reached out like hands, threatening to snag his armor. Yet within the challenge lay a strange beauty. Wildflowers of impossible colors bloomed between ancient stones, and streams of crystal-clear water cut through the forest like ribbons of silver. Birds with feathers glinting like gemstones flitted overhead, and small woodland creatures observed him silently, their eyes reflecting an intelligence that was almost human. Alaric could not help but feel that the forest was alive in a way beyond explanation, aware of him, perhaps even guiding him. As night fell, the forest changed again. Shadows deepened, and the temperature dropped sharply. The sounds of nocturnal creatures filled the air, some comforting, others eerily alien. Alaric found a natural alcove formed by ancient roots and rocks where he built a small fire to ward off the chill. The flames flickered against the surrounding trees, casting long, shifting shadows. He ate sparingly, drank from a nearby stream, and studied the scholar's maps by firelight. According to the notes, the forest concealed pathways to hidden ruins and secret passages within the citadel itself, routes that had been known only to a few chosen individuals. The forest was both obstacle and protector, preserving these secrets from unworthy eyes. While resting, Alaric noticed movement in the shadows beyond the firelight. A faint ethereal glow emerged, and he saw figures walking gracefully among the trees. They were neither entirely human nor entirely animal, their features shifting in the dim light. Alaric realized he was witnessing the spirits or guardians of the forest, beings tied to the enchantments that had preserved Eldric's secrets. They observed him silently, as if testing his intentions. For a long moment he held his breath, feeling the weight of their gaze. Then, without aggression, they vanished, leaving only the rustle of leaves in their wake. The following morning, Alaric pressed onward, guided by subtle clues left by the forest itself. A cluster of stones forming an arrow, a tree with bark shaped into a symbol matching the scholar's maps, and faint trails of light that seemed to flicker at the edge of his vision. It became clear that the forest was not merely enchanted for defense, it was a living map, offering direction to those who could see and interpret its signs. Every challenge he faced, every illusion he resisted, brought him closer to understanding the delicate balance between danger and revelation. As he moved deeper into the heart of the woods, he came upon ruins partially reclaimed by nature. A small stone chapel, its walls cracked but standing, and a courtyard where moss grew thick between cobblestones. Alaric sensed that these ruins were once part of a forgotten outpost of the citadel, used by those who managed the kingdom's outer defenses. Among the debris, he found fragments of carved stone depicting scenes of the citadel's history, battles, and ceremonies. Each fragment told a story, each image a testament to lives lived and choices made, reminding him that even in the forest, the legacy of Eldric endured. Hours turned to days as Alaric navigated the Enchanted Forest, yet he felt no fatigue in his purpose. Each step revealed more of the kingdom's hidden past and the pathways leading to the citadel's inner secrets. He encountered natural obstacles, strange creatures, and illusions that tested his perception, courage, and resolve. But he pressed on. The forest, alive with ancient magic and memory, became both mentor and challenge. Finally, after what felt like an eternity within the shifting shadows and vibrant glades, Alaric emerged onto a high plateau overlooking the northern gate of the citadel. Through the thinning trees, he could see the ancient walls, partially covered by vines but still formidable, and the towers reaching skyward like silent sentinels. The forest had guided him, tested him, and prepared him for the trials within the Forgotten Citadel. With a deep breath, Alaric stepped forward, leaving the shadows of the forest behind. The citadel awaited, and with it the next chapter of discovery, danger, and revelation. The Enchanted Forest, with all its magic and mystery, had ensured that only the brave, perceptive, and steadfast could reach the heart of Eldric, and Alaric had proven himself ready.
Historical battle accounts mix with myth, revealing how fear and deception toppled the kingdom. The walls of the Forgotten Citadel rose before Sir Alaric like the skeleton of a once mighty giant, half shattered but still proud. He stood atop a ridge overlooking the northern gate, recalling the scholar's notes and the maps he had painstakingly decoded. According to the texts, Eldric had survived numerous threats in its prime, yet there was one siege that had shaped its destiny unlike any other, a siege that, intriguingly, had never truly taken place. Alaric crouched, scanning the valley below. Broken carts and overgrown battlements hinted at long-forgotten defense preparations. Soldiers, if any had once been stationed here, were long gone, and the banners of Eldric had faded into dust. Yet the strategic positioning of the citadel, with its high walls and commanding vantage points, suggested careful planning. According to legend, neighboring kingdoms had plotted to attack, but some unseen force, some clever strategy, had prevented the siege from ever reaching its bloody conclusion. As Alaric crouched, he scanned the valley below. Broken carts and overgrown battlements hinted at long-forgotten defense preparations. Soldiers, if any had once been stationed here, were long gone, and the banners of Eldric had faded into dust. Yet the strategic positioning of the citadel, with its high walls and commanding vantage points, suggested careful planning. According to legend, neighboring kingdoms had plotted to attack, but some unseen force, some clever strategy, had prevented the siege from ever reaching its bloody conclusion. As Alaric explored the outer walls, Alaric discovered signs of fortifications hastily abandoned. Arrow slits blocked by fallen beams, platforms for siege engines left empty, and guard posts where ropes and pulleys still hung in silence. He could almost see the ghostly silhouettes of soldiers preparing for an invasion that never came. The scholar's notes hinted that Eldric's leadership had anticipated the attack, not with brute force alone, but with subtle manipulations that dissuaded enemies from advancing. The kingdom's intelligence network, its spies and messengers, had outwitted entire armies without drawing a single sword in anger. Venturing into the main courtyard, Alaric noted the intricate arrangements of stones and hidden passages. The courtyards, now silent, had once been alive with drills, commands, and the measured clatter of armored feet. The young knight imagined the commanders and strategists debating over maps and tactics, using knowledge of the land and the citadel's architecture to outthink invaders. The siege, it seemed, had been a psychological one, an exercise in foresight and cunning that had prevented bloodshed, leaving the city intact while projecting the threat of total destruction to those who dared approach. Alaric moved to a section of the walls overlooking the valley. The terrain was treacherous. Cliffs, rivers, and dense forest would have made any siege difficult. He noticed ancient markings etched into the stone by architects, engineers, and soldiers who had designed the fortifications. Some indicated secret firing positions, others pointed to decoy gates and hidden traps. Every line and symbol told the story of a kingdom that had relied on wit, intelligence, and strategy rather than sheer force to survive threats. The siege that never was a testament to Eldric's brilliance, its defenses a silent warning that few had dared ignore. As Alaric descended into the inner sections of the citadel, Alaric discovered chambers that once held war councils. Scrolls and parchments littered the floor, some partially intact, others worn to near illegibility. He carefully examined them, piecing together a timeline of events. One scroll described a coalition of neighboring lords who had planned a coordinated attack on Eldric. Another detailed the countermeasures taken by the king's advisors, misinformation, secret alliances, and feigned weaknesses designed to lure enemy forces into hesitation. The siege, as recorded in these chambers, was a war of perception rather than confrontation. Hours passed as Alaric traced the network of secret passages, tunnels, and escape routes. The citadel's design was astonishingly sophisticated, a combination of military engineering, psychology, and arcane knowledge. It was clear why the siege had never been necessary. Eldric's enemies had been outmaneuvered without a single arrow fired. Alaric felt a surge of respect for the planners and builders who had created such an intricate defense system.
The citadel had protected not only its people, but also its history, knowledge, and treasures, preserving them for those patient and clever enough to seek them centuries later. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyards and towers. Alaric climbed to the highest tower still standing, gazing at the horizon where enemy forces might have assembled in another age. He imagined the armies pausing, uncertain, their confidence shaken by the subtle defenses and clever deceptions of Eldric. The siege that never was became almost a legend in itself, whispered among neighboring kingdoms, a story of a city that could defeat armies without lifting a sword. Alaric marveled at the ingenuity and foresight it had taken to orchestrate such a feat. In the fading light, he explored the citadel's armory, finding rusted weapons and shields, some intricately decorated, others plain and functional. Though they had never been used in a great battle, the presence of these arms told a story of readiness, of preparation, and of deterrence. Alaric understood that Eldric's strength lay not only in steel and stone, but in strategy, in the clever application of knowledge and perception. The kingdom survived through foresight, deception, and careful planning, a lesson that resonated even in his time. Night fell, and Alaric settled in a small chamber overlooking the inner courtyard. The silence was profound, yet he could sense the echoes of history around him, the whispered commands of officers, the cautious steps of soldiers, and the quiet murmur of citizens reassured by the invisible shield of their leader's cunning. The siege that never was not simply a historical curiosity. It was a testament to Eldric's intelligence, resilience, and the enduring wisdom of those who had walked its halls. Alaric reflected on the implications. The kingdom's survival had depended on more than bravery. It had relied on knowledge, insight, and the courage to act with precision and patience. These principles had ensured that Eldric's legacy endured, leaving behind a citadel filled with secrets, lessons, and pathways to hidden truths. And Alaric, young knight and seeker of truths, was ready to follow them. Under the pale glow of the moon, the citadel stood silent yet defiant, a monument to intelligence, strategy, and foresight. The siege that never was had proven the strength of Eldric's legacy, a strength that Sir Alaric would continue to uncover, step by step, room by room, secret by secret.
Ancient treasures, forbidden knowledge, and cryptic inscriptions revealed the kingdom's secrets. Sir Alaric stood before the northern gate of the Forgotten Citadel, the cool evening breeze stirring the tattered banners that still clung to their poles. Beyond the gate lay the heart of Eldric, and beneath that heart lay the vault, a place whispered about in the scholars' scrolls as holding the kingdom's most precious treasures, forbidden knowledge, and cryptic inscriptions. Few had ever glimpsed its secrets, fewer still had lived to recount the experience. Alaric tightened his grip on his sword, his lantern casting long shadows on the cracked stones, and descended the steps that led into the darkness below. The entrance was narrow, carved centuries ago into the rock beneath the citadel, hidden from prying eyes. Alaric's boots echoed softly as he moved down the cold, winding stairway. The walls were damp, and faint carvings appeared intermittently along the stone, symbols that matched those he had seen in the scholar's notes. Each mark seemed deliberate, a language intended for those who could decipher its meaning. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with the scent of earth, dust, and the faint tang of old metal. Somewhere beneath the citadel, secrets waited, and Alaric could feel their presence like a pulse beneath his feet. At the bottom of the stairway, a massive stone door blocked his path.
Intricate designs covered its surface, geometric patterns interwoven with glyphs and depictions of Eldric's past rulers guarding treasures with outstretched hands. Alaric studied the carvings, tracing the lines with his fingers. Each symbol appeared to correspond with another, forming a code. Slowly, he traced the patterns in the sequence suggested by the scrolls, and with a grinding sound, the door shifted, revealing a passageway shrouded in shadow. Beyond it lay the vault. Inside, the air was cool and still. Torches, long extinguished, hung from the walls, their blackened remains a reminder of centuries of silence. The chamber opened into a vast underground hall, its ceiling supported by carved stone pillars etched with the history of Eldric. The light of Alaric's lantern revealed relics scattered across the floor, rusted weapons, faded tapestries, and chests sealed with locks that had not been opened in generations. But beyond these artifacts, deeper in the vault, lay the treasures that had drawn him here, the artifacts, tomes, and cryptic inscriptions that preserved the kingdom's legacy. Alaric approached a large stone pedestal at the center of the chamber. On it rested a golden chest, its surface engraved with the royal crest of Eldric. He knelt to examine it, noting the precision of the carvings and the weight of the chest, suggesting it contained objects of great value. Carefully, he pried open the lid. Inside lay an assortment of treasures, gemstones that glimmered even in the dim light, intricate jewelry, ceremonial daggers, and scrolls sealed with wax bearing ancient symbols. Each item seemed to carry a story, a fragment of history preserved against the erosion of time. His attention shifted to the scrolls. They were written in languages both familiar and arcane, detailing not only the kingdom's history, but also its philosophy, science, and understanding of the natural world. One scroll described astronomical observations, noting the alignment of stars that guided the kingdom's calendars and festivals. Another revealed experiments in alchemy, the blending of minerals and herbs to create medicines and elixirs that had once healed countless citizens. The knowledge preserved here was vast, a testament to Eldric's wisdom, and Alaric realized that the vault was more than a treasure trove. It was a repository of human achievement. As he moved deeper into the vault, he noticed inscriptions on the walls, etched into the stone with meticulous care. They were warnings, instructions, and cryptic messages meant to guide or deter those who sought the kingdom's secrets. One inscription read, "Knowledge is both a gift and a burden. Wield it with wisdom or be consumed by it." Another depicted a series of symbols that, when interpreted, revealed the locations of hidden chambers and secret passages within the citadel. Alaric traced the inscriptions with his fingers, feeling a connection to the minds that had designed this subterranean labyrinth. The vault was alive with history, and every wall held a story waiting to be understood. In one corner of the chamber, he discovered a series of locked cabinets. Their surfaces were dusted, yet the carvings suggested they contained records of immense importance, ledger books, treaties, and accounts of diplomatic correspondence. Alaric carefully picked the lock on one, revealing scrolls detailing Eldric's alliances, conflicts, and trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms. He marveled at the depth of planning, the foresight of rulers who had ensured that even in the face of betrayal and invasion, their knowledge would endure. These documents were not mere paper, they were the blueprint of a civilization. Further exploration led him to a subterranean library, its shelves carved directly from the rock. Ancient tomes filled the shelves, some bound in leather, others in materials unfamiliar to modern hands. Alaric opened one cautiously, revealing diagrams of architectural designs, plans for fortifications, and detailed maps of the kingdom and surrounding lands. Another tome contained philosophical musings, ethical codes, and reflections on leadership and governance. The combination of practical knowledge and wisdom revealed the citadel not only as a fortress, but also as a center of learning and enlightenment. Suddenly, a faint glimmer caught his eye along the far wall. Moving closer, Alaric found a hidden alcove containing a single, small chest. Inside was a medallion forged from gold and embedded with a gemstone that seemed to pulse faintly with light. It was inscribed with runes that promised protection and insight, a relic of the kingdom's mystical heritage. Alaric realized that Eldric had combined both knowledge and magic, practical skill and mystical understanding to create a kingdom that could endure in memory even after its physical destruction. Hours passed as Alaric examined the vault, cataloging items and making careful notes. He understood the enormity of what he had discovered. The treasures, scrolls, and inscriptions were more than relics. They were the distilled essence of Eldric, preserved for those willing to seek them with courage, patience, and reverence. The vault beneath the citadel was a testament to Eldric's ingenuity, resilience, and the enduring human desire to create, record, and protect knowledge. As night fell, Alaric lit a small lantern and stood at the center of the vault, gazing at the relics and inscriptions around him. The chamber was silent, yet it resonated with the whispers of the past, the voices of scholars, rulers, artisans, and citizens who had ensured that Eldric's legacy would survive. He realized that this vault was not merely a place of treasure, but a guardian of memory, a repository of wisdom meant to inspire those who came after. With a final, careful sweep of the chamber, Alaric prepared to ascend to the surface. He left the treasures undisturbed, documenting what he had found, and memorized the location of each inscription, scroll, and relic. The vault had revealed its secrets to him, but only partially. Much remained hidden, awaiting future discovery. As he climbed the winding staircase toward the citadel above, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The knowledge of Eldric was now entrusted to him, and he would carry it carefully into the world above, where the kingdom's forgotten wisdom could once again inspire awe and understanding. Emerging into the cool night air, Alaric paused to look back at the entrance of the vault. The citadel loomed above, silent and imposing, yet within its walls lay the accumulated genius, courage, and magic of a kingdom that time could not entirely erase. The vault beneath the citadel had shared its secrets, and Sir Alaric, young knight and seeker of truths, understood that his journey into Eldric's history had only just begun.